My name is Lauren Forrester, and I'm 32. The night my boyfriend told me, "My work wife buys me lunch almost every day. You should take notes." Something very quiet inside me stood up, buttoned her coat, and left the part of me that made excuses for men on the brink of becoming someone else. We were midway through a perfectly good dinner I'd chosen and paid for. Brick walls, soft brass, the low murmur of other people's anniversaries, when Aiden said it. He said it the way some people test a fence, leaning his weight on the wire to see if it gives. I watched the words land between the water glasses and the check I had already slipped my card into. I watched his thumbs chase a message thread that wouldn't stop lighting up. I don't hate offices. I just don't like empires built out of compliments. Aiden, 29, had been promoted 8 months earlier to junior marketing manager at a huge cement gray insurance company that prints its values on glass. His manager, Gabrielle Stilton, was the kind of woman who could make a budget approval sound like a benediction. Married. 2 kids and photos that looked like they'd been curated by daylight itself. Aiden treated her praise like an IV drip. The work-wife joke started cute and died quickly. It was haha, and then it was habit. Gabby and I just finish each other's thoughts. Gabby says my deck is the best thing she's seen in months. Gabby's taking the team to Monley. She insisted we stay late to prep. I don't mind a man who loves his job. I mind a man who looks at me and thinks I'll clap from the audience while he auditions for a different life backstage. I tried soft. Work-wife sounds loaded, don't you think? He'd grin, the kind where you can see the teenage boy who got away with everything. Babe, it's networking. Don't be one of those jealous girlfriends. I wasn't jealous. I was counting. You can tell a lot from an expense line. Lunches, late nights, gifts that don't fit on a receipt. My brain does risk for breakfast. It was almost funny that it took me this long to run the numbers at home. That night, when he told me to take notes, I felt the click. Not dramatic, not even a snap. More like the soft latch of a jewelry box. He went back to his phone. I went back to my meal and stared at the door of the life I used to think was ours. I smiled. "You're right," I told him, as if we were discussing the weather. "That's generous of her. I should thank her." For the record, I did not raise my voice. I did not storm. I went home and did what I always do when the floor looks suspicious. I checked the beams. LinkedIn gave me Gabrielle M. Stilton in 2 minutes. The company site gave me an executive bio full of verbs: leading, delivering, championing. A public Facebook page, her husband on a boat, kids in orange vests that matched the sunset too perfectly to be an accident. And then the thing I wanted most, the company's code of business conduct and ethics, 80 pages of pre-written consequences. I read like I was being graded. Section on personal relationships. Ironclad. Any romantic or personal relationship between a manager and a direct report constituted a conflict of interest. The appearance alone could trigger investigation and disciplinary action, up to and including termination. Gifts, personal benefits from a manager to a subordinate, explicitly prohibited and, in the language of people who prefer not to fire you but will, cause for immediate review. They had built an unlabeled trapdoor into their own floor. I was just finding the handle. I ordered a $50 Starbucks gift card and a painfully bland thank you note, the kind with embossed leaves like the paper itself is yawning. When the envelope arrived, I wrote in my neatest, most Sunday school handwriting, "Dear Ms. Stilton, I wanted to send a small, sincere thank you for the support you've been showing my boyfriend, Aiden Vance. He mentions you often, especially how kind you've been to treat him to lunch most days. In a hectic world, it's a comfort to know he has such a generous, attentive manager looking out for him. Thank you for taking such good care of him. All the best, Lauren Forrester." No accusations, no italics, only their facts, placed carefully under a bright, polite light. I addressed it to her corporate office. I mailed it on Tuesday. Wednesday. Aiden left early, a whir of cologne he never used to wear, teeth a shade whiter than last month. I answered emails, drank my coffee, and did not check my phone. I told myself I was done performing interest in a storyline that didn't cast me. Around 2:34 p.m., my screen bloomed. Missed call, Aiden. Then, "Call me now. What did you do?" "Lauren, I am serious. HR has me in a meeting. They have your card." HR. The 2 letters that turn grown people into children counting their homework. I put my phone face down and finished a spreadsheet. I answered one more email. I let the calm sit in the room with me. By the time I drove home, a podcast about the history of interest rates was explaining the difference between panic and correction. I felt neither. I felt like a woman walking through her own front door. Aiden's shoes were off, a bad omen. His tie was askew. He had the gray cast of a man who just learned that the company isn't a family after all. "What did you do?" he asked, and the way he said it, like I'd pushed him in front of a train I'd only pointed at, almost made me laugh. "I thanked your boss," I said, hanging my coat. "You said she buys you lunch almost every day. It seemed polite." "You don't send evidence," he blurted, then clamped his mouth shut as if he could stuff the word back in. "Evidence." I let the quiet spread. "It's against policy," he said, too fast. They think there's something going on between us." "Is there?" I asked. No heat, no tremor. "If truth is a coin, sometimes you just flip it and let it land where we both can see." He froze. The adolescent bravado fell through the hatch. "It's networking," he tried, smaller now. "She believes in me." "You're 29, I said gently, like we were both tired. "She's your manager. Your work wife buys you lunch. Your real girlfriend buys dinner, and you tell me to take notes." I took one. Then I sent a thank you card. He stepped closer, and the pleading started its tiny, practiced tug. "You have to fix this. Call HR. Tell them you were being, I don't know, overly grateful. Tell them you misunderstood." No. It wasn't loud, but it was the kind of no that turns locks in hallways. "I won't lie to a corporation's legal department for you. Whatever happens between you and HR is between you and HR." His jaw worked. "They suspended me," he said, like the word itself should bounce off the wall and hit me instead. "Then you'll have time to pack," I said, and it surprised me how easy the sentence was to carry. I pulled his spare suitcase from the hall closet and set it on the sofa. "Tonight. Essentials only. We'll schedule the rest." He sputtered. "He called me cruel. He said I was blowing up his life over a card." I looked at the card of our lives, the lease with both our names, the car I'd been stupid enough to co-sign because his image mattered and my credit was good. I thought about the folder in my desk with the warranty for a 1920s mahogany writing desk he liked to call ours, even though the receipt lived under my name. I thought about the way I'd always insisted on receipts, like breadcrumbs out of a forest I didn't know I'd need to escape. He texted someone. Zara, I guessed, the friend who made enabling look like a love language. He threatened to call his father, Arthur Vance, the man who speaks in letterhead and uses courtrooms like living rooms. I told him to do what he needed to do. I told him I was going to get a burger and that he had 1 hour to pack what he couldn't live without. On the way out, I checked my mailbox. Nothing. The world. Indifferent. The evening had the kind of light that forgives you for starting over late. I stood on the sidewalk for a breath and realized the tight pain in my chest had been one long note for months. It finally ended. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt accurate. Back upstairs, his suitcase sat open, the flurry of a man who packs like a confession. Shirts rolled, chargers tangled, a cologne bottle that didn't belong to our life. He looked at me, panicked, and I could see him hunting for the boyish charm that saved him in college and at parties, and in rooms where women held the door. I watched him find it and decide not to use it. That somehow felt like respect. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said. "That's the thing about policy," I said, and I almost smiled. It's written for when it does. He lifted the suitcase. The wheels bumped the door jamb twice, then cleared. He turned in the hallway. "You'll regret this," he said, and meant it as a hex, not a hope. "I already regret what came before it," I said. "This part is just math." When the door latched, the apartment exhaled. I set 12 cardboard boxes by the foyer and labeled them with a black marker, each letter a boundary. Clothes, toiletries, books, electronics. I pulled the car file and stared at the lease. Primary, Lauren Forrester. Co-signer, me. Possession, him. My pen hovered, then pressed down on a post-it. Call finance, first thing. Explore voluntary repossession. Not revenge, risk management. Before bed, my phone buzzed one more time. Aiden. They're meeting with Gabby again in the morning. And then, as if he couldn't help himself, "You always loved being right." I put the phone face down. I like being safe more. Outside, the city moved through its own investigations. Lights turning off in offices where people were still pretending family, and somewhere, in a building built on glass values and steel consequences, an envelope with embossed leaves sat in a file, a $50 square of sunlight on the truth. Tomorrow would be louder. I brushed my teeth and turned out the light. Part 2. By morning, the company had turned the lights all the way on. Aiden texted at 8:11 a.m., as if time-stamping could soften anything. Suspended pending investigation. HR said, appearance of impropriety. The word appearance did a small, cruel cartwheel. That's what I'd been living with for months, appearances lining up like volunteers to hold the curtain for him. He followed with, you're going to fix this. Then, Dad wants to talk. I put coffee on, opened my desk, and laid out what actually fixes things. Documents, lease, insurance, a copy of the company's code, highlighted where their policy turns into a trapdoor. I pulled the folder labeled Vehicle and flipped to the first page with my name typed in a font that always makes me sit up straighter. Primary lessee, Lauren Forster. Co-signer, possession, Aiden Vance. I'd sign in because he said image matters in marketing and because my credit score didn't flinch when banks looked at it. He made the payments from his account, most months. I had started noticing that the utilities money he asked me to float matched the car payment down to the dollar. My phone rang with a voice that didn't introduce itself because it never has to. Lauren, Arthur Vance. He had the tone of a country club with a gate. Good morning, I said, and somehow I meant it. There's a freedom in no longer auditioning for anyone. You've made a terrible mistake, he said. You've jeopardized my son's career with a childish stunt. You're going to call his HR department today and explain you are an overzealous, unstable girlfriend seeking attention. You'll apologize and state clearly that there is no inappropriate relationship, that you misunderstood an office joke. You will clear this up. He spoke like billing by the minute. I pictured him turning his wrist to check a watch that decided other people's time was his. No, I said, just that, like a door that locks with a push. He inhaled, a theater breath. Listen carefully. I know the head of HR. I can make this go away if you cooperate. If you refuse, there will be consequences. I'm sure there will, I said, calm as an email. But I won't lie to a corporation's legal department to sanitize your son's choices. If a bland thank you card detonates a career, the explosive wasn't the card. You little... He caught himself, swallowed the word. You will regret this, and it will be expensive. He hung up. My kitchen clock ticked in a way I'd never heard before, like it had been waiting to be invited into the conversation. At 9:03, the messages started from Zara, the best friend who's really a PR firm for excuses. Zara, you are an actual monster. Aiden is devastated. He hasn't stopped shaking. He might lose everything because your ego couldn't handle him being successful. Also, his car payment is due in 3 days, and he can't make it because of you. If he loses the car, that's on you. I hope you're proud. I stared at the last line. The car wasn't on me, but the risk certainly was. I called Ben Carter, my friend who lives under contract law like it's a blanket. Ben has a voice like a level. When it's straight, you can feel it. You're the primary, Ben said after I summarized in bullet points. He's the co-signer with possession. That's the worst configuration when the relationship breaks. Your goal is simple: eliminate exposure. You can do a voluntary repossession since you're the primary and payments are at risk. It'll be a credit bruise, you know that, but better a bruise than a fracture. I hate that my credit will pay for his theater, I said. It's the cost of extraction, Ben said. We'll dispute it later with documentation that you weren't in possession and acted to minimize loss. Paper wins. Keep everything. I called the finance company. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't play the tragic chord. I spoke in dates, amounts, and status. I am the primary on lease numéro, I said. The co-signer in possession has been suspended from his job and vacated my residence. Payment due in 3 days is at risk. I'm requesting a voluntary repossession for risk mitigation. The agent's tone shifted to the one professionals use when they realize you understand the machine. Yes, Ms. Forrester. Given you're the primary and payment risk is high, we can dispatch a tow to the vehicle's current location with your authorization. I provided Zara's apartment complex and the model, plate, and color. The agent read the script about impact to my credit, and I initialed with my voice. It felt like signing a permission slip for a painful field trip. An hour later, my phone lit up like a storm. Aiden. Lauren, what the hell? The tow truck is here. You can't do this. This is theft. Aiden. Answer your phone. Answer your phone. I waited, breathing. Then I typed, "I'm protecting my credit. Ask your manager for a ride." I blocked his number and Zara's. The echo of silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was just honest. By evening, an envelope arrived by courier like a threat in a suit. Vance, Rothman and Klein, LLP. I broke the seal, the way you touch a bruise to take inventory. Cease and desist and demand for compensation. They accused me of tortious interference and malicious intent, demanded that I cease all contact with Aiden, his family, and his employer, which I had, and that I pay $50,000 for damages, termination, reputational harm, emotional distress. $50,000 for consequences arriving on schedule. I scanned it to Ben. He called, laughing softly like the floor had just revealed all its nails. "Bullying by stationery," he said. "Tortious interference is nearly impossible to prove here. They'd have to show you knew the outcome and acted for that outcome alone. Your note screams innocence. It's perfect. Will respond, firmly." His letter on Carter and Dwyer letterhead was elegant surgery. Our client sent one unsolicited thank you card as a good faith gesture. Any employment consequences were a direct result of your client's violations of internal policy. Any further frivolous threats will be met with a motion for sanctions for harassment and abuse of process. He sent it certified. I filed both letters under noise/keep. 2 days later, a knock at my door rang with authority. I looked through the peephole and saw a uniform. Behind him, curbside, Aiden hovered, with a look that wanted to be victorious and couldn't find the script. Next to him, Arthur Vance, jaw set, suit pressed like an argument. I opened. "Officer," I said, "can I help you?" "Ma'am, we're here to conduct a civil standby. Mr. Vance is here to retrieve his personal property. He's concerned there may be a disturbance." "Of course," I said, because I had been waiting for the day the law would come, ask for fairness I had already boxed. "I've prepared his belongings." I swung the door wider to reveal 12 neatly taped boxes, each labeled in marker. Clothes, books, toiletries, electronics. The officer's shoulders visibly loosened. Paper and order are sleep to people who see chaos all day. Aiden tried to shoulder past him. "That's not all," he said, loud enough for the hallway to gather. "My grandmother's antique writing desk is in the study. It's a priceless family heirloom. She's keeping it." The officer looked at me. I had rehearsed this. "Are you referring to the 1920s mahogany desk by the window?" I asked, polite as glass. "I purchased it at Main Street Antique Mall in August last year. I have the Amex receipt." I pulled it up on my phone. Subject line receipt. Antique desk, $2,200. Date, merchant. Last 4 digits of my card. The officer read, nodded, and handed the phone back like we'd just completed a ritual. His tone flattened into the cadence of policy. "Sir," he said to Aiden, "this is a civil matter. Heirlooms are for judges to decide. If she has a receipt in her name, it's not theft. We're here for undisputed property only. Let's load the boxes." Arthur tried the move he probably uses on junior associates. "Officer, I don't think you understand who I am." "I understand you need to remain on the sidewalk," the officer said without looking at him. "Unless you want me to call my sergeant." We performed the quiet choreography of endings, father and son ferrying boxes to a car that wasn't his anymore. Aiden kept glancing past the officer as if the apartment might reveal a secret that would restore him. It didn't. At the curb, he turned. "You did this," he said, small and stunned. "You ruined my life with $50. "No," I said, and the truth came out steady. "You and your manager wrote the policy into motion. I just mailed a card." He wanted one more scene. The officer gave him a look that said some stages are closed. When the door shut, the apartment let out a long, slow breath. I leaned against the cool wood and felt the ache arrive. Not the grief of losing him, but the ache of the administrative cost. My credit would dip. I would spend hours disputing a mark that says I was responsible when what I was careful. I walked to the study and touched the desk's polished edge. I had bought it for us, and it turns out us is the most dangerous buyer in the world. A thought sharpened. I could sell it and pay Ben. I could turn an old piece of wood into a receipt that said, simply, done. My phone buzzed with a text from a mutual friend who had never chosen spectacle. Heard HR's final decisions. You were right about the trapdoor. A second message. More tomorrow. I set the phone down and watched late light slide across the floorboards. a slow, golden affidavit. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like someone who had stopped lying to herself and started labeling boxes. Tomorrow would bring letters and verdicts, and the relief of not having to pretend the company is a family or that a boyfriend is a partner just because he moved his toothbrush in. Tonight, I turned off lamps, one by one, until only the city glowed. Part 3. The text from my mutual friend came early, as if news couldn't sleep. Final decisions just announced. Then, after a pause long enough to feel like a drum roll, Gabrielle, demoted, 3 levels, lost stock options, transferred to compliance, Aiden, terminated. HR used your card as proof of gifts and policy breach. I read it twice. No punctuation could change the outcome. They'd done what corporations always do when reputation trembles. Clip off the infected branches and pretend the roots are fine. Gabrielle's LinkedIn would start with, seeking new opportunities. Aiden's would go silent. I'd expected some satisfaction, but what I felt instead was air. Thin, tasteless, honest. By noon, I'd made peace with quiet until the universe remembered Arthur Vance never surrenders a stage. The intercom crackled. Courier for Ms. Forrester. The envelope looked expensive enough to have a personality. Gold-embossed firm name. I sighed. Inside, another letter, same firm, new thunder. Demand for compensation escalated to formal legal action. Ben would laugh, but I felt a tremor of fatigue, not fear. It was the fatigue of knowing some men wield law the way toddlers wield volume, to drown out consequence. I scanned, forwarded, and within minutes Ben replied with a single sentence. On it. Go make tea. That evening, while water hissed in the kettle, I thought about the chain reaction of a $50 card. How many lives had rebalanced around that small, polite gravity? Gabrielle's family, Aiden's career, Arthur's pride, my peace. Sometimes accountability doesn't scream. It prints. 2 days later, there was another knock. 3 steady raps. Not a courier this time. Law enforcement again. The officer from last week, same flat eyes, same notebook. Ms. Forrester, he said, we received a call from Mr. Vance's father. He's requesting another civil standby. Claims you're withholding property he now says is jointly owned. I let the sentence sit, savoring the echo of déjà vu. Of course, officer, I said. You're welcome to look. Everything he owns left with him last time. Arthur and Aiden stood at the curb, heat shimmering off the asphalt. Arthur had his lawyer face on, that calm, predatory smile lawyers use when they think intimidation counts as logic. Aiden's posture was collapse-dressed as defiance. They entered with the officer. I gestured to the space. Clean, spare, mine. What exactly are you claiming I'm withholding? I asked. Arthur nodded towards the study. The desk again, he said, like a man replaying a losing hand because he paid too much for the deck. The officer frowned. We've been through this. She has proof of purchase. This time, Arthur said, drawing out the words, we're claiming improvements were made to the property while under my son's possession. He installed organizers, refinished drawers. That constitutes co-ownership. It was almost admirable, the audacity of trying to trademark wood polish. Officer, I said, if refinishing drawers grants ownership, my landlord owes me a building. The officer's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Sir, he said to Arthur, if you believe you have a claim, you can file in civil court. My job is to keep the peace, not divide furniture by emotional value. Arthur inhaled through his teeth. You'll regret making an enemy of me. Already tried that, I said softly. It's surprisingly underwhelming. The officer signaled the exit. Let's wrap this up. As they turned, Aiden looked back one last time. The hallway light caught him unevenly. For a second, he looked almost young again, before Gabrielle, before ambition learned to flirt. He opened his mouth like he might apologize, but Arthur's hand clamped his shoulder. The door closed on the moment. I leaned against the wall until the adrenaline settled. Then I opened my laptop. There was an email from Ben. Their threat. They folded. Their firm realized the sanctions motion is real and that discovery would expose emails they'd rather not. You're free. Free. A small word that somehow weighed less than the silence that followed. Over the next week, the fallout reached full orbit. Mutual friends, those still brave enough to text, filled in details. Gabrielle's marriage ended publicly. Her husband filed for divorce within days of the HR report. Aidan, unemployed, was back under his parents' roof. Arthur's firm had taken a reputational hit for the frivolous letter. Consequences didn't need me to drive them. They had their own engines. I sold the mahogany desk to an antiques reseller, $1,800 in cash, enough to pay Ben and have something left for a weekend escape. When the movers carried it out, the apartment looked bigger, lighter, like the room itself exhaled. That night, I poured a single glass of wine, stood by the window, and thought about all the hours I'd spent collecting evidence for peace of mind. Leases, receipts, screenshots, letters. Proof that what I'd lived was real. Proof that I hadn't imagined the small humiliations. It struck me that in the end, none of it was revenge. It was documentation. The difference between vengeance and clarity is paperwork. My phone buzzed once more, Ben again, sending me a screenshot of the legal docket. Case withdrawn. No further action. Congratulations, his message read. You won by standing still. I smiled. Standing still had never felt so much like moving forward. I turned off the lights. Tomorrow, I would start undoing the last threads. Credit repair, new passwords, new peace. The city outside blinked, indifferent and alive. Somewhere out there, Arthur was drafting another letter that wouldn't land. Somewhere, Aidan was telling a version of the story where he was the victim of a vindictive woman. Let him. Narratives don't change facts. What I had was cleaner, a signed receipt, a closed file, and a quiet apartment that finally sounded like mine. Part 4. A week passed, and for the first time in months, my mornings were still. No vibrating phone, no incoming lectures disguised as concern. Just sunlight creeping across the kitchen counter and the low hum of a refrigerator that didn't belong to anyone else's chaos. When I opened my laptop, my inbox glowed with the subject line, HR investigation, final outcome. I didn't work there, but curiosity still pressed its finger on the doorbell. The mutual friend had forwarded it. Internal announcement. Confidential. Please delete after reading. I read anyway. Following the conclusion of the investigation into policy violations within the marketing division, Senior Manager Gabrielle Stilton has been reassigned to the Risk and Compliance Department effective immediately. Aidan Vance's employment has been terminated for cause. 2 sentences. That's all the world ever gets after the earthquake. No mention of long hours, shared lunches, the lazy jokes that built a rope they later hung themselves with. Just cause and compliance, corporate poetry. Ben called that afternoon. Officially closed, he said. Their firm backed off. The HR verdict seals it. They can't touch you. You sound disappointed, I said. I'm just unused to clients who get justice without litigation, he replied. It's rare and satisfying. Later, as I walked through the apartment, each room felt larger than its square footage, like I'd bought back space from tension. The only ghosts were receipts. The repossession had left a dent in my credit, 90 points. The kind of wound that makes financial institutions frown like disappointed relatives. But Ben was right. It was a bruise, not a break. I'd sent the bureau my packet, proof I was the primary signer, that the co-signer defaulted, that the car left my possession by protocol, not negligence. I'd win, eventually. Real closure takes paperwork. That evening, I found a text from the same mutual friend who had witnessed everything from the sidelines of decency. You should hear what's happening with them. Apparently, Gabrielle's husband had filed for divorce the moment HR's findings reached him. Their house, their boat, their prepackaged weekends. It was all on the market now. The company demoted her to a gray cubicle world 3 floors below her former office, stripped of her team, stripped of her title. Aidan, meanwhile, had moved back to his parents' house in Westfield. Arthur wasn't speaking to him, not really, only issuing orders. His mother reportedly cried at brunches about the vindictive woman who destroyed her son. I'd stopped correcting that narrative in my head. Let them need a villain. I had no desire to audition. Zara, the friend who used to text walls of rage, posted a story about toxic loyalty tests and betrayal disguised as morality. I scrolled past it with the same attention you give to weather you've already dressed for. By the weekend, I decided to do something ceremonial, purge the last of the joint detritus. Old mugs, concert stubs, photos I'd half forgotten were in drawers. I dropped everything into a trash bag, except for one item, a photo from our first trip together, before he was a man with a work wife and an HR file. He looked so harmless there, smiling in a sunburned way, as if the world hadn't yet learned what he could take for granted. I slipped the photo into an envelope and wrote across the front, "Evidence of a version of you that no longer exists." Then I shredded it. By Sunday, the apartment was unrecognizably mine. I opened the window, and the air smelled like permission. That night, Ben texted again. "You still thinking of selling the desk?" "Already did," I wrote back. "Used the cash to pay you and booked a weekend away." "Where to?" "Somewhere quiet enough to hear myself not apologizing." He sent a thumbs-up emoji and the line, "Peace costs paperwork." I liked that. As I packed for the trip, I realized I didn't feel vengeful, not even proud, just aligned. Every bad decision had folded into a single, symmetrical consequence. The card, the car, the codes, all gears, in a clock that had been ticking long before I found the courage to listen. And when people asked later, because they did, of course, how it ended, I told them the truth. It didn't end with revenge. It ended with documentation, and that's so much quieter. Part 5. 6 weeks later, I could finally say it without irony. I was doing okay. The credit report still showed its bruise, a dip that looked like a scar across an otherwise clean record, but it no longer felt personal. I'd started treating it like weather, annoying, temporary, not my fault. Every month I mailed in one more letter of explanation, one more piece of proof. Paper heals what pride can't. The apartment had learned new rhythms. My shoes by the door, my books stacked in patterns that made sense again. Even the air felt less argumentative. Ben kept his promise and refused to let me pay for more hours, saying, "You've already paid in stress." I dropped off a bottle of decent wine at his office anyway with a note that said, "For all the laws you didn't have to explain twice." Some nights I still replayed fragments, not from pain, but from fascination. How small the trigger had been. One thank you card, one gesture of polite exposure. It wasn't even revenge, it was just a mirror. And when people live behind reflections long enough, honesty looks like cruelty. By mid-September, I took the weekend trip I'd promised myself. Just 2 days by the coast, salt air, no schedule, a quiet hotel that smelled faintly of lemons and old stories. I left my phone face down the entire time, and nothing in the world fell apart. On Sunday morning, I met someone. His name was Evan Parker. He was sketching a small park design on a napkin at the cafe, the kind of distracted artist who forgets his coffee is cold. When I asked what he did, he said, "I try to convince cities that trees are infrastructure." I laughed. It was the first time my laugh didn't sound like proof of life. We talked for hours, about design, about silence, about the strange satisfaction of doing the right thing even when it ruins your weekend. When I told him what I did for a living, risk assessment consulting, he smiled and said, "So, you prevent disasters." "Sometimes," I said. "Other times, I just name them correctly." When I got home that evening, my inbox was empty of threats, my voicemail blank. I sat at my desk, not the mahogany one, that was gone. Just a simple pine table that didn't carry ghosts. I opened a new document and started typing the words I'd wished someone had told me months earlier. There's a difference between revenge and consequence. One is loud, the other just arrives. I didn't plan to post it anywhere or publish it. It was just a reminder, my own internal code of conduct. In the weeks that followed, life stayed ordinary. Work picked up again. I found myself checking the clock less, sleeping more. The world hadn't changed, but my thresholds had. Red flags didn't look romantic anymore. They just looked red. Evan and I met again, and again after that. He never asked invasive questions about my past. He just listened when pieces slipped out. "You mailed a thank you card?" he said once, incredulous and amused. "That's diabolical in the most polite way possible." "I prefer effective," I said. And maybe that's what healing is, when you can tell the story and both of you laugh without losing respect for what it cost. Some nights I still think about Aiden, not with longing, but curiosity, where people like him go when the applause stops. Maybe he's reinventing himself under another manager, another Gabrielle with a different name. Maybe he's finally learning the quiet art of accountability. Or maybe he's just explaining me to someone new, the way people rewrite their own endings. Either way, it's not my story anymore. Before bed, I sometimes open the drawer where the $50 gift card receipt still lives, the only artifact I kept. A square of proof that you can expose a whole structure with a gesture so small it fits in an envelope. I look at it once, smile, and close the drawer. I don't feel like I won anything. I feel like I finally stopped losing. And that, I've learned, is what peace actually sounds like.